Andrew Thomas was 4. Saquon Barkley was 2. When you're picking that high, you're the Detroit Lions. You stink year after year after year. And that's what I asked Joe Judge on our conference call. I asked him about the timing. I said, why now? Why, you know? And he said, well, this is the best decision for the team, a bunch of coach speak. But there's nothing Freddie Kitchen can do. It's going to be the same offense, which Joe Judge has admitted.
You got the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Appreciate you tuning in. We certainly hope everybody had a very happy, healthy, and well-fed Thanksgiving. Johnny Mac, what was the best thing on your Thanksgiving table yesterday?
I'm a big stuffing guy.
Are you?
Yeah. So that's always a big moment for me.
Right.
That and the alcohol on the table.
I did not have any alcohol yesterday, but I had a lot of stuffing. Any specific type of stuffing?
No, I love it all, man. I love it. If you have stuffing out, I'm going to eat it.
Did they, and I say they, I'm assuming Mrs. McMullen, I don't know if you ate out or with family or friends or whatever, who prepared the stuffing?
She did. So it was spectacular. She's in the next room. So
is she? Good. And I believe that our stuffing was spectacular, but I will tell you right now, there's no question in my mind that if you and I had sat at the same table and you had your stuffing, I had my stuffing, your stuffing is going to come in second place.
Oh, all right.
Because my wife makes a mushroom stuffing that is ungodly. And I mean, there's so much other stuff in this, heavy on the butter. So I know it's like clogging my arteries, but it is unquestionably the most delicious stuffing I have ever had in my entire life. My wife got the wedding from my mother-in-law's next door neighbor down in Louisiana. And you know how rich they cook down south. Oh, this stuff is so good. And she makes such a big amount of it that I'll be eating it for the next 3 days. So if I keel over and die here on Birds 365 at any time, you'll know why it is.
Yeah, I'll be
right behind arteries from mushroom stuffing. Guaranteed.
I'll be right behind you. And it was interesting because our buddy Ross Tucker was in Dallas yesterday doing that game. So he had the Cowboy spread for Thanksgiving, and they have the best spread in the NFL always on a regular day. So they have the whole Thanksgiving theme obviously going. So Ross was pretty happy as well, and he wasn't even home, and that's positive.
All right. Now, when you say Cowboy spread, are you talking about on any game day spread?
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable.
Specifically for Thanksgiving?
It is unbelievable. They might not have won a Super Bowl in a very long time, but they are the undisputed champions of press box food spread, and second place ain't close. Let's put it that way.
I'll take your word for it. I've been to Cowboys Eagles as just a fan. I've never actually been, and forget about in the new Jerry World. I wasn't back. I had never made it in the old stadium. I've been to several games between Eagles and the Cowboys, but I've never made it to the press box. So I'm going to take your word for it.
People hate when I bring this up, but they run a class outfit down there. Not necessarily successful on the field. I'll give you an example. All the employees at AT&T Stadium have tailored sports jackets. Tailored sports jackets. He runs a class outfit, but I will add, for a stadium called AT&T Stadium, and I don't want to disparage a future advertiser, but I'll throw it out there. And wireless ain't great. You would think AT&T Stadium would.
That's the same thing with MetLife. And one of the big sponsors, they have 4 major sponsors, and each get a quarter of the season. One of the stadium. One has one entrance, one has the other entrance.
Yeah. And Pepsi Gate. I'll be going in the Pepsi Gate.
You're going in the Pepsi Gate. Well, one of them is a cellular provider, And you would think if that's the case that I used to believe that my service stunk because my service isn't the one that is a sponsor at the stadium, and thought maybe they're blocking me from being able to get reception on my phone here in the stadium. That still may be the case, but the same thing with MetLife. I can never get updated scores. I have to rely on the antiquated one on the
Ooh,
scoreboard.
that's torture. That's torture. I think a lot of these stadiums now have open Wi-Fi networks. So the fans, obviously, there's 75,000 in Dallas. There's 100, and you got 100,000 people trying to get on the same Wi-Fi network. But that's not scientific. That's just my thought.
Might very well be. All right, Johnny, let's talk about Sunday's opposition. We did on Wednesday, watching the Giants play last week, Monday night national game. They look pretty putrid. The offensive line is not good at all. They don't block well. They don't open up holes in the running game. They're just a red hot mess right about now. And you often chide me about when you get out on the wrong side of Jody McMullen, there's no coming back. There's just he slams the door shut on you, and that's all there is. And it takes a very high bar for me to get to that level. But your estimation of me is 100% right. Yes, when I get out, you're out. And you're out and you're not coming back in. And I've been like this for Daniel Jones for 2 years now. And I just don't think the guy can play. You rightfully said the other day he's a tough judge because the Giants have so many issues, specifically on the offensive line, injury to Saquon Barkley, injury to their wide receivers outside, that he is difficult to judge because – no, he's not. Because the body of work is big enough that I've seen enough games of him when there has been decent enough protection for him to have time in the pocket, for him to be able to deliver the football when infrequently their wide receivers or tight ends do get open enough. He's just not good enough, plain and simple. On a week-in, week-out basis, I think it's rather obvious. Some weeks there are explanations. Others there aren't. He's just not that good, and I stand by that. And here's the beauty of it. I think the Giants are going to be foolish enough to go with him another year. Even after this year, they're still going to have Daniel Jones as their quarterback this week. So, yes, my worry about the Eagles winning the game this week is minimal. Even though it is on the road, even though it is a divisional opponent, it is the dumpster fire that is the New York Giants right now. I don't think the Eagles are going to have an issue.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't, and that's what I kind of said. This is, take care of business portion of the schedule. This is a bad football team right now, a bad football team who also happens to be in disarray. Look, you don't fire your offensive coordinator on a short week that also has a holiday.
Short and holiday.
Yeah. Unless you're desperate, unless you're trying to say something and scapegoat. And Joe Judge was asked that question on his conference call with us, and I gave him credit for even doing the conference call, by the way. So I do give him credit for that. But yeah, he's scapegoating, no question about it. Now, obviously, he denied it, but you want to point the finger at somebody to try to save your own hide, so to speak, and that's Dave Gettleman as well. You might be right about Daniel Jones. I don't get to see him play that much. He certainly hasn't played well. I certainly wouldn't have taken him number 6 overall way back in the day. I thought he was overdrafted to begin with. So it wouldn't surprise me. But I do look at that offensive line, and I do bring up, and Derek Carr played yesterday. I mentioned this on the show earlier in this week. What's the difference between Derek Carr and David Carr? David's got more talent, actually, more physical gifts. Derek turned into the good, you could argue, really good NFL quarterback at times. David was shell-shocked, man, behind one of the worst offensive lines in NFL history. And again, I'm probably overstating it with Daniel Jones because I don't think he has that kind of talent as somebody like David Carr had. But I got to tell you, with the Giants, man, and by the way, they've tried to fix it. Andrew Thomas was what the heck was he? I think he was the 4th pick in the draft, Jody. you know, Will Hernandez was a second-round pick. Matt Pert was a third-round pick. Nate Solder got a big money deal, was a good player in New England for years. They tried to fix the issue. They can't fix the issue. And, all you have to do, I just talked about Daniel Jones was 6. Andrew Thomas was 4. Saquon Barkley was 2. When you're picking that high, you're the Detroit Lions. You stink year after year after year. And they've been on this treadmill really since they moved on. They made the big mistake and they moved on from Jerry Reese and the structure and the continuity of that organization that was having some down years. And I would argue they were having down years because of the fumes of the future Hall of Fame quarterback that shouldn't be a Hall of Fame quarterback, Eli Manning. They would have righted the ship with those guys if they would have stuck it, if they would have stuck with the continuity. And since then, it's been revolving door at coach, bad coach, bad coach, bad coach, revolving door at GM. They made a bad decision there. It's what happens in this league. Now, I'm not arguing continuity because they shouldn't stick with this group. So now you got to find the right group, Jody. You have to understand. You have to have the patience to understand this sport is cyclical. When you have a proven group, it doesn't mean everything's going to be great at all times. But if you stick with it, guys who are proven they know how to do it, they'll do it again. And you can go all the way back to Jerry Reese for where the Giants made their mistake. Now they're a freaking laughing stock. They are.
Agreed. And you just said you give Joe Judge credit for doing the out-of-town media gathering thing during a short week, during a holiday week. It doesn't mean that Joe Judge is doing a good job or that you think he's a good coach. You just give him credit for doing his job.
Yeah.
He could have ducked and hid if he wanted to. He didn't. I do the same with Dave Gettleman. Like you, I give him credit for acknowledging when he took over, our line stinks. We're terrible. I have to put resources toward this offensive line. And you ran him down, and he did. First round pick, second round pick, third round pick, the highest paid left tackle when he gave him his money, Nate Solder. So number one, he recognized and acknowledged our offensive line stinks. Number two, he did go out and put resources toward getting new hog mollies. That's his favorite word for the big guys up front who have to do the dirty work and the blocking. It all becomes irrelevant if you can't pick the right guys. Just acknowledging your shortcomings, nice, so what? Spending money, draft capital on it, so what? If you're going to do that and then pick bad players, it doesn't matter. You can give the guy all the credit for effort and thought process or whatever. It all comes down to just one thing. Get it right. Get players who can play. The Giants have not done that on the offensive line. That's why they still stink. That's why Daniel Jones is never going to be a franchise quarterback. That's why Saquon Barkley, who, oh, by the way, I love, as much as I take shots at Daniel Jones, I defended to the hilt the pick of Saquon Barkley because I thought he was going to be a once every 10-year type back. And I do think you can use a second overall pick in the draft for a player if he is that good. Well, he hasn't been that good in the NFL. A lot of it has to do with injuries. And when you take a running back, you're taking that risk. Running backs get hurt. They do miss time. They take shots. So I knew that when I defended that pick at number 2. But, yeah, they've not come close to fixing the offensive line, which means no running holes for him either. And that's why right now the New York Giants offense stinks.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why, it's not sexy. We all know it. And people, when we were coming up to this draft for the Eagles and I would constantly default to their belief of generally you build up front on both sides of the football. Nobody likes it. They always want the skill position players. The Eagles were able to get that this year. And Devontae Smith. But it really does begin up front, man. It really does. And especially on the offensive side, I say it all the time. If you can't block people, what does it matter? You can have the shiniest toys, and it's great. Kadarius Toney is phenomenal. You see him make 5 moves to gain 4 yards. What an athlete! Okay, great. You can't block for him. What the heck is he going to do? You don't have a quarterback that can get him the football consistently. Great. You mentioned Saquon Barkley. Yeah, nobody ever questioned. I thought it was a bad pick at the time. I continue to think it's a bad pick because of the devaluation of the position as a whole, but I never questioned his talent. I never questioned his ability. But what good is somebody with that ability if you can't block for him?
Right.
Doesn't matter how good you are. So I mean, it's and Sam Darnold was, I think, the third pick that year, so that hasn't worked out. But then I think you went on that run. I know Denzel Ward was up 10. I know Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson's the best player from that draft. I forget what he got picked.
A guy by the name of Josh Allen went later in that draft.
Josh Allen,
He's
yeah,
pretty
Josh
damn
Allen.
good for the Buffalo Bills.
I think that was Roquan Smith's draft. I think it was Minka Fitzpatrick, maybe. I'm
but if they take a Minka Fitzpatrick number 2,
no. I bet Josh Allen, but people would have, offensive tackles tend to be in the conversation that high. Offensive guards aren't. If you take Quentin Nelson and you're the New York Giants, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And that's, I always talk about player development. There's certain players that are ready to go. Quentin Nelson was one of those guys. He was so developed so well. I never heard scouts talk about an offensive lineman like I heard them talk about Quentin Nelson.
Yep.
But people don't think that way, and it's tough to justify taking somebody like that with the second overall pick. So I get it, but hasn't worked out, to put it mildly.
All right. One of the big moves the Giants made this offseason, we talked about Dave Gettleman and him acknowledging he was supposed to fix the offensive line and he hasn't. They, again, were trying to give Daniel Jones what he needed to prove that he was a franchise quarterback. I did not believe it then. I do not believe it now. I don't believe it's ever going to happen. But again, they've attempted to do the right things. They've just failed at it. And one of those, and I know we're just 60% into his first season, Kenny Galladay has been close to a bust for the Giants this year with the amount of money that they paid him. And don't kid yourself, in a capped league, you cannot not talk about the amount of money that a guy is being paid. Sorry to say that. People there, I know players can't stand being evaluated that way. And some fans say, I don't care. Once he's on the team, it doesn't matter how much he's making. Of course it matters how much he's making because you're living in a capped world. And Kenny Galladay eating a whole bunch of money is not a good thing for the New York Giants this year and or potential future years. Again, do we give Gettleman credit for rightfully acknowledging we need an upgrade at wide receiver, or does it completely go by the boards because, Galladay isn't close to paying dividends?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, it's a broken record. It's the same thing with Toney. It's the same thing with Barkley. You can even go with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, who's actually been, over the years, probably an overachiever. And they don't have an issue at the skill position at the skill positions from a talent standpoint. They can't get them the ball. They can't get him the ball because they can't block anyone for the quarterback to get him the ball. Now, maybe the quarterback can't get him the ball. Maybe you're right. Maybe he doesn't have the talent. Maybe he's that bad. But I got to tell you, I know the offensive line is that bad because I can see that empirically. So it's the exact opposite with the Eagles, who have one of the best offensive lines in football, and you see things starting to head in the right direction. They don't have great skill position talent, the Eagles. They don't. Guess what? For everyone who loves Jordan Howard, you'd rather have Saquon Barkley behind this offensive line. You'd probably like to have Kadarius Toney or a slot receiver like Sterling Shepard instead of Quez Watkins and Jalen Reagor. The Giants' issues aren't talent at the skill positions other than maybe quarterback, which is obviously big. The Giants' issues all stem from the fact that they cannot block anybody, period.
Agree with you on that front. The Giants did make the move that they made as soon as they got beat on Monday night. Announcement comes down on Tuesday that Jason Garrett has been given his walking papers as the offensive coordinator. And I said this with us here on Wednesday. I'm not going to say that this was a faulty decision, that Jason Garrett was not the problem for the Giants. Oh, he was a major contributor to the problems with the Giants. Could anybody have done the job with that offensive line? Maybe, maybe not. But Jason Garrett did nothing to open my eyes, to make me believe that he's got football vision above and beyond others. So I really didn't have a problem with them firing Jason Garrett. I had a problem with them only firing Jason Garrett and not making other changes. And then, therefore, he gets scapegoated, and that is the exact word I'm going to use. I think they've scapegoated him. 2 points on this. Number one, do you think this was a head coach decision? Do you think it was purely the head coach walking into the general manager's office and saying, "Our offense stinks. You guys hired this guy for me before I became the head coach. He's not getting the job done. You've got to get him out of here." Or do you think it was Gettleman deciding, listen, we can't just continue to sit here and do nothing. So I have to do something to show that I am trying to win football games from now to the end of the season. How do you think that decision came down that Garrett got the boot?
I think it was a joint decision between the coach and the GM because they're both on the hot seat and they're both looking to blame somebody, and they're both looking now. The Giants aren't going to make a run to the playoffs. They're not going to win a lot of games. But if you start to look better offensively, you can say, "Oh, look, we got the scapegoat out of there. We're heading in the right direction. Give us another year, and you buy some time." I think that's what's going on. Um, Joe Judge set this up a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about how ineffective the offense was. So clearly, and remember, he fired his offensive line coach in season last year. Um, so he's been willing to do these things before. But I saw it here at the end of the Doug Peterson regime, and I say it all the time when people talk about Jeffrey Lurie changing and becoming more involved. I've heard this from numerous people. He's not more involved. He's always been really involved. Um, he's just scapegoating more than he had in the past. And he's, for whatever reason, maybe it's because you had this success, you finally get over the hump in the Super Bowl, and you start to blame people. I think, you go, but even go back before the Super Bowl. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people kind of brush this to the backside, pretend it didn't happen. Jeffrey Lurie wanted Frank Reich out of here after Doug Peterson's first season. He wanted to scapegoat him. There was talk about moving on from Doug, at least a little bit of talk from one and done. They were going to scapegoat Frank Reich, and Doug Peterson said, kind of put his foot down at the time and said, no, we can't move on from this. And obviously things went in a different direction. Now Frank is lauded. He's great. Everything. They call him up. They get Nick Sirianni. They didn't even want him here in 2017. And then the whole narrative changed. And then after Frank and John DiFilippo left, then, you had the struggles. The window was still open. You had the scapegoat Mike Rowe. Then all of a sudden it was Press Taylor, who, by the way, I can tell you firsthand, they raved about Press Taylor in this organization. What a smart guy. He's going to have, what a great future. Then Doug Peterson took a liking to him. What an idiot. He can't be the offensive coordinator. A lot of scapegoating. That's what happens in this league. That's what's happening in New York. We'll talk about it with Bob, hopefully, because nobody's more plugged into the Giants. But this is scapegoating. There's no other way to look at it. There is no other way to look at it. And I'm with you. Jason Garrett's probably not the answer. Probably a bad hire to begin with. Other than he was a head coach in this league and maybe helped Joe Judge, a rookie head coach, from that standpoint, learning about the job. We talk about the enormity of the job all the time here. He was a head coach in Dallas for a long time, so he could help with some of the logistics. But as a coordinator, probably probably was a bad hire, not the answer. But this is just a dumb time to fire. It doesn't accomplish anything, Jody. It doesn't accomplish anything.
And the reason, one of the reasons why I will specifically question the hiring of Garrett, if you were looking for added value, when you take a guy off someone in your division, someone you played plenty, someone that he's supposed to know very well, well, then you're supposed to be able to show a little results from that. I believe the Cowboys beat the Giants 3 straight times. They beat them twice late. Well, no, the Cowboys were so bad last year. What did the Cowboys and the Giants do last year? I try to
Boy, I
remember.
have to look it up. Let's see.
Because the
Uh,
Cowboys crushed them earlier this season, um, and they do have one game left. Last year,
uh,
Dallas. The Giants actually won. Oh, it was the last game of the season when both teams were already. Well, no, the Cowboys, the Giants hung in there.
At Dallas, they lost 37-34
34.
to go to 0-5. They lost 5 games to start the season. Then they finally beat Washington for their first win. Then the second game was, week 17. They beat Dallas 23-19. And that was, to,
And
to improve to
that did
improve to 6-10, and they were upset because the Eagles tanked.
right. It did mathematically keep them involved in the race. But again, just looking at the Giants' schedule, they had lost 3 games in a row prior to beating the Cowboys the last week of the season. They got beat by Arizona. They got beat by
Yeah,
Cleveland. They got beat by
yeah,
Baltimore.
they did.
So they were red hot going into that last game, which they won, and I'll give them credit for winning it and keeping their hopes alive. And then their hopes were thwarted by the Eagles when they decided, we're not
By
really
the
going to try
way,
and win
and
this
and
game.
and they had kind of so I'm looking at their schedule from last year. They kind of righted the ship. They started 1-7. Then they won 4 straight to go to 5-7, and they're feeling good about themselves. And then they started that streak you were talking about, Jody, and they lost by 19 points to the Cardinals. They lost by 2 touchdowns to the Browns. They lost by 2 touchdowns to the Ravens before they finally beat the Cowboys, and they're complaining about not. Yeah, come on, 6-10. You had an opportunity to get that 6th win for a month, and you're losing by at least 2 touchdowns in every game.
Yeah. So the Giants were what they were last year. But they did specifically, I'm just looking at the Dallas New York matchup because I'm sure at some point when they were negotiating with Garrett to come in as the offensive coordinator, he said, and by the way, I'll give you a leg up in those 2 games against the Cowboys next year because they're keeping my guy Kellen Moore in place, and he and I are like that, and I'll be able to lend that. Well, they actually did beat him once, but they got crushed earlier this year, and Jason Garrett is out of there before they ever get to play the Giants a second time. So the next question has to be, Johnny Mac, what is Freddie Kitchens going to bring to the table? Former head coach of the Browns, who has been the tight end coach, running back coach. He's had a couple different positions with the Giants. He is more tied to Joe Judge. I can pretty much guarantee you that was a Judge hire because Joe Judge, when he was a college player, played for Freddie Kitchens. He was an assistant on the staff in college where both of them were at. What do you remember? What are you hearing? What do you know about Freddie Kitchens and how drastically, I say that with tongue firmly implanted in cheek, the New York Giants offense will change this week?
Well, I mean, he's probably best known for being one of the one and done Cleveland coaches. He was in Cleveland as the coordinator. Then they elevated him to the head coach, and Hugh Jackson. It was that era, and obviously you remember how bad the Browns were with Hugh Jackson. So he wasn't taking over a great team. I think he won 6 games. So the Eagles mentioned they'll look back at some of that Cleveland tape to see what he likes to do offensively. I don't know. Freddie's a pretty big guy, I think. He was in Cleveland. I haven't seen him recently. Maybe he can block. Maybe he can go out there and block somebody. I don't know. He's in a bad spot. There's not. What do you think Freddie Kitchens is going to be able to do on a short week with a holiday, as we mentioned? And that's why I said the timing. And that's what I asked Joe Judge on our conference call. I asked him about the timing. I said, why now? Why, you know? And he said, well, this is the best decision for the team, a bunch of coach speak, but there's nothing Freddie Kitchen can do. It's going to be the same offense, which Joe Judge has admitted, the same verbiage, because you can't change things. You can't change things in the middle of the season anyway, and you certainly can't do it on a short week with a holiday. So it's going to be the same offense with a different name on top calling the plays. Maybe it's more of the only thing you can point to, Jody, is there's some energy from it. That happens occasionally when you make these changes. You get that short bump of whatever you want to call it, where people are a little bit more focused. And, that offensive line has taken some significant hits. And you might say, well, Thomas has got some talent. Solder, used to be able to play. And so, and maybe they pull up their bootstraps and show some pride and play their best game of the year. I think that's the only hope of more than any kind of schematic or play calling change.
Agree on all fronts, J-Mac. And remember, Freddie Kitchens at one point was thought to be the quarterback whisperer, because in the interim time that he took over, he and Baker Mayfield got on the same wavelength, and he was going to be the guy who was going to get the best out of Baker Mayfield and going to be the perfect fit with Baker Mayfield. And then when he became the full-time coach next year, his relationship with Baker Mayfield went in the tank too. So the whole quarterback whisperer thing was a nice narrative.
Bruce Arians, he's the quarterback whisperer.
Oh, and he can legitimately say it. Freddie Kitchens cannot. And I am 100% with you in that they're not going to change anything this week. They've had 2 friggin' practices.
Yeah.
They can talk about it. They can philosophically, yes, it's going to be a different voice in the ear, but they're going to have 85 to 90% of the same playbook they had in place. They can't try and redo an entire offense in a short holiday-included work week. It's got no chance of happening. It's going to be the same giant offense this week that it was last week.
Yeah. Nick Sirianni talked about that. And it happened in Denver when Pat Shurmur got COVID, and I forgot who called the plays, but it was a last second, obviously, change. And there's going to be a little bit of a different fingerprint because, different people are different people. Not everybody's the same. Somebody's going to call something, but the plays, the scheme, all that stuff is not changing. All that stuff is not changing. And again, Freddie Kitchens can't make these guys block. Now, maybe the pride takes over. Maybe because they've taken so many hits, they'll play a better game. That's your better hope if you're a Giants fan than Freddie Kitchens drastically, becoming Bill Walsh. And as you mentioned, 3 practices, 2 of them walkthroughs. All right. Good luck.
The only hope the Giants have is that Andrew Thomas, after catching his first ever NFL pass for a touchdown,
great catch,
as a matter of fact,
great catch.
It was a good call and B, a good catch. Didn't really have any impact on the outcome of the game because they got their rear ends kicked for 59 minutes and 50 seconds, except for that one little 10-minute blurb, 10-second blurb. Nice play, Andrew. That because of that, he's going to be motivated. Now he realizes he's an NFL player. Maybe I should actually hit someone. No, I doubt highly that's going to happen. All right, yes, John mentioned, and I can confirm Bob Glauber from Newsday, Hall of Fame voter, NFL columnist, is going to hop aboard with us in about 20 some odd minutes from now. So we will get Bob up. He did confirm. I got a text from him, said, yes, he will be aboard. So we're looking forward to that. We hope you're looking forward to hour number 2. Do me a favor. Do John a favor. See, John knows about the algorithm. I don't. So he knows that if you hit like right now on Birds 365, you're going to help him out. You're going to help us out. You're going to help me out. I'm glad you're tuned, and please like us here on Birds